trivial example to practice how the plumbing in Redux works, but something that actually does something, right? As opposed to just a hello world. So we're going to create an application. We have that already. Let's create a simple counter that has 2 buttons to go up and down, and it just displays the value of the counter. Yes? So let's do that. Let's go here, and let's in our components, let's create a counter component. Right, so let's say style, this will be a counter component, and this will be import React from React, and this will be just a plain old function that takes, right now, doesn't take anything, and well, actually, yes, say the value, the current value of the counter. And this just renders a div that says h1 counter, and it has renders the value and has 2 buttons with a plus and a minus. Okay, and let's go into our top level app, and instead of rendering a hello container, let's render the component. Well, actually, we can just put it in here. So this is the counter component, and let's import that. So this will be import, import the counter component. Import that from the down to, let's see, down to components, and then counter component. Counter, hello? Oh, did I misspell it? I did. All right, can I do real quick, refactor, rename, counter. There we go. All right, so let's see. That should have rendered. And oops, does not match, blah, 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 blah. Counter failed. Did I counter? Oh, I never exported it. Let's export this. So export default counter component. There it is. So here's our component at the top, counter, and then hello, hello from reducer. Everybody good? All right, excellent. So as we mentioned earlier, our component, the state is not going to be maintained by our component. Nowhere in React are we going to maintain state. Instead, we are going to let Redux do that. Right? So that's the state of the counter, the value. Also, we're not going to handle any of our events. Instead, we're going to notify the reducer for this. Right? So we're going to do here, if we're going to say up and down, 2 functions that are going to be passed into us, that somehow we're going to notify our reducer that the user pressed the plus or the button, right? So here we're going to say there's going to be an onClick, and we're going to call up, right? And if we're going to have an onClick, we're going to invoke down, right? We don't maintain state, right? The reducer does that. All right, excellent. So let's implement what the reducer might look like. So let's go into reducer. The reducer, let's create a counter reducer. It'll be the counter reducer. And the counter reducer, this will be just a function. Right? The function implements a state machine. Okay? So this might say something like const the counter reducer. It's going to be a function. It's going to initialize, takes in this state, and it takes in the action, and then it calculates the new state. Calculates the new state. All right? So we can initialize the state to be that the value of the counter is 0. Right? Could we agree on that? That makes sense, that the initial state of the counter is 0? And for now, we're just going to return this state. We're just going to return the state up to this point, right? So we're not going to look at the actions just yet, right? We're just going to have always return the value 0. Right, so let's focus on mapping this state where the value is 0 down to the component. Right, so let's plumb that first. Right, looks like that one's easy. So we'll need to export this, and this is the default, and this is the counter reducer. And so let's go up to the app. Instead of using the hello reducer, we're going to use another reducer. Who say import the counter reducer. There it is. We're going to create. We're not going to use the hello reducer here. We're going to use another store. We're going to use the counter reducer. So counter reducer, and we're not going to do the hello container for now. All right, we're going to just comment that out. Everybody good? All right. So now we're just rendering the counter component right now, but we know that to map the state that comes from the store down to the component, it has to go through a container. Yes? So let's create that container. All right, so right now, let's see, is this still working? Okay, yeah. All right, excellent. So let's create the container, and this will be the counter container. So JavaScript, this will be the counter container, which is going to be a React component. So import React from React. We'll need to connect, right? We'll need to connect from the glue library, so the React Redux library. We'll need the actual component, the counter component. So we'll need the counter component. There we go. And now let's do the mapping. We're going to say the function that does the mapping from the state to the property, right? It's going to take as argument the state coming from the container, and it's going to calculate a new mapping object that says that the value that the counter is expecting, right, the property value that the counter is expecting, grab it from the state's value variable, right? Obviously, these states are so trivial that this says, what, really? That's all we're doing? But as we get more and more complex, these state objects are going to be much more harder to map, all right? We'll actually need a function to calculate this. All right, once we have that, we can just do the container. We can say counter container is going to be equal to the connect. I will this be a const and connect, and the connect is going to take the states to property mapper and the actual component, the counter component, and then we need to export. We're going to need to export this container. So export default, the counter container, right? And finally, from the app, we're just going to do the counter container here. So counter container, right? All right, so let's look at this, and it didn't work. What? Counter, let's see, container, counter container. There's a counter container, the mapper, the state, value, property, and the counter component is expecting value, and this is a value. Did I save everything? Let me move this here. Oh, it was working. I didn't refresh. Sorry. So that 0 is coming from the value in the reducer, right? So if I change the state in the reducer, right? If I go back to my counter reducer and I say you start at 10, right? It starts at 10. Everybody good? Right? Now we need to go the way backwards, right? We're gonna send those plus and minuses down to the reducer. So let's do that next.